Let's move along here to Nick. Nick is calling from Detroit. Is that right, Nick? Hello.
Hey, Bart, what's going on?
All right. And what's the size of the game here, Nick?
So this is going to be MGM Detroit 510. It's a 500 2K semi-private game, nine-handed.
500 to 2K? Is that right?
Yeah, correct. It's $8 timed every 30 minutes.
500 to 2K MGM Detroit. $8 time. That's not that bad. $8 time. I mean, we used
No,
to.
it works out. They do a $25 bomb pot and they just take it out of that.
Oh, that's cool. What kind of bomb pot did they do?
Just double board hold'em.
Oh. Well, that's still. I mean, we used to play $9 at 1020 at Commerce back in like 2007. So, you guys are playing $8 a half, like almost, over 15 years later. How deep are you for this hand?
Effective stack's gonna be 2,400. It's gonna be the villain stack.
2,400 effective. And it's a semi-private game, like one of those quasi-invite games inside the casino.
Yeah, it's pretty much there's a game runner, and then if you ask him for a spot, it goes like he comes in with a list, and everyone on his list gets the spot first, and then whoever wants to call in after that is free to join if any spots open up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So main villain for this hand, a little background, is going to be a very loose, aggressive player. He uses wild overbets, many bluffs, but he mixes up play pretty well. So in this session alone, I've seen him 3-bet ace-6 off, and then he called a raise next to act with ace-ace, and then back raise 4-bet when it got back to him.
Now, the interesting thing about that, though, Nick, is that these guys can be sometimes very unpredictable and hard to play, right? I'm going to go so far as to say, though, the only people that I've actually seen who are true lags who are winning players, and they're few and far between, are at like the highest stakes. If you even call like Garrett Edelstein a lag, like he was playing like 30 to 35% of his hands on Hustler. Like these guys can be hard to play, but they play so fundamentally all over the place that in general, for the most part, they will end up being overall losing players. I don't know what your take on this guy is, but
yeah, I mean, it's a little hard to tell because I don't get to play that much.
Yeah.
But I see him. He's in the room every day.
Mm-hmm. But if you're playing again, I know this is not the size of the game, but if someone calls me in from the 5-5 game at Garden 600 cap and says the villain is a good lag, no, those two things don't add up. 9-handed 5-5. Yeah.
No, I mean most people at the table just call him a donkey, but I think he kind of plays into that as well. So when he does make a good hand, people assume it's always a bluff, right? And then he shows up with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Pre-flop, I'm going to be in the hijack with Jack of Spades, Jack of Diamonds. It's 9-handed. It's a little bit of a misread by me. I guess there was an undergun straddle to 20. I thought the under the gun player just min-clicked to 20.
Okay.
I don't know if he just announced it because I'm in seat 7, he's in seat 3, and I just didn't hear it.
So it is to 20. There is a plus 20, but you thought the guy min raised. Okay.
Yeah, which threw me off because no one min raised at all. And
I mean, that probably wouldn't really. That probably doesn't really change whatever you're going to raise to, though, does it?
No, not too much.
Yeah.
So I'm in the hijack with, like I said, Jack. I opened to 75, cut off the call. Button calls, the blinds fold, and the straddle completes.
And at this point, do you know it was a straddle?
No, I didn't find it was a straddle till after the hand.
Oh, okay. Well, well, that's interesting. The only thing that changes, like if you say, well, what does that change about the hand? If we don't know, if we think that this guy min raised and then but he's actually the straddle, the thing that changes about this hand is that if you do get mixed up with the straddle in this hand, he's much wider than what you would have thought of, right? Because you're opening to 75 and then it goes call, and there's a lot of guys that are going to complete with a bunch of hands closing the action there in the straddle thinking that they're getting a price versus them like min raise calling under the gun, right? Yeah. All right. So it looks like it's 300 here. What, 4 ways? Is that right?
Yeah, 315 with the blinds.
Okay, 315. Okay.
Flop's going to be 8 of spades, deuce of diamonds, deuce of clubs.
All right, so 8 of spades, deuce of diamonds, deuce of clubs. So you flop an overpair here, and it's a rainbow, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a bad flop for jacks.
Yep.
So straddle's going to check. I went 150. I was like, I know multi-way usually go a little small, but I thought on an 8 deuce deuce rainbow, it was a fairly safe flop. So I went half pot.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like this. Well, I mean, your hand needs a little bit more protection because you've got Jack Jack, but I do usually in live games, like just because people are V-pipping too wide, almost no matter what the stakes, I normally bet larger than what might even be like theoretical in given situations. Here, I just don't know. I mean, I think I probably, it's very subtle. I think I would go kind of smaller than that. I think I might go like 100 here. And the reason, the difference here though, is because if you bet 150, you actually might get some folds at 150 that you wouldn't get at 100. And I'm trying to think about that is like, if you go 150 here, and then if the cutoff has like pocket fours, pocket fives with a button and the straddle behind, I don't think you can call. And then the button's got the straddle behind. I just think that you might, I mean, obviously 8X is going to take off probably at some, at least for one straight. Now, the thing about 8X here is that it's not as strong as 8X as top pair on an unpaired board, right? Because it has, if you've got 7-8 and the guy's got an overpair on 8 deuce deuce, your 7's not relevant, right? I mean that's the only thing I would say. All right, so you bet 150, okay?
Yeah, the cutoff's going to fold, button calls, and straddle folds.
All right, so cutoff folds, button calls, and then folds. So the straddle's not getting involved. So the button here closed the action. So now we're heads up, and we're at what 615, right?
Yeah, 615.
And this is the guy that, well, you start with 2400 effective, so you got like somewhere around just under 20, 21 and change, right? Okay, left.
Yeah, just like every Jack's hand, turn's going to come ace of clubs.
So 8 deuce deuce rainbow turns the ace of clubs. Okay.
Yeah, so 2 clubs now. I mean, I was heads up, like I said, with the very loose player who can show up with any 2 cards. I figured the ace favored my range a lot, but I was also a little stuck because I felt like ace X would be a lot of hands that does float, whether it be ace 8, ace 10, ace queen if you decided not to 3-bet.
Yeah, I'm a little bit torn on this one. I mean, the gut reaction against like a lag is to sort of let him bluff off like in a given situation. But because the ace is so good for your range, it's not necessarily the card that the lag chooses to bluff. And then especially if you check call turn, your hand looks a lot like either like a high pair or like ace X that was starting a C bet. Whereas a better card to like let a lag sort of say, give him rope to hang himself, like in this exact situation would be like, an offsuit 4, like a total brick. I don't know if what you were thinking about, if it was a low brick, if you were going to check, but that would be like,
yeah, I mean, heads up, if it's a brick like that, I'd probably size up, 450 to 550.
You don't want to give him rope to hang himself.
I mean, the only problem with that would be is if he, because he's someone that can show up with any 2 cards. If I check and he goes 1,000, I'm playing Jacks as a bluff catcher now.
But what's wrong with that though? If you see bet 8 deuce deuce and this laggy guy calls button because he's going to try to take it away in the turns of 4, and you check and he goes 1,000, I mean, your hand fares to be best there a lot, right? Especially if he's going to take that type of sizing because if he has a lot of floats.
Right, and he's the person that would. I mean,
that's what I mean. But I'm saying that
50 to 180. So
right, but the thing about this card, what I'm trying to point out though, is that this card's a little bit different. Now, Nate, All-Star CLP content creator, said size down. I kind of like that off the. I feel like if you could probably go like 200 here, and like you kind of get into a situation where you're giving yourself like a really good sort of cheap price on a bluff if you were starting a multiple barrel, right? And maybe he feels like he needs to continue to defend, with an 8 or something like that. Now, with that being said, if a guy can do some hand reading, he could kind of put you, I guess he could kind of put you in a little bit of a difficult spot if he thought that, you're checking everything, so you don't have like pocket aces here. And what did you start to bet? Well, like if you started a bet with ace queen, are you betting here again with ace queen? But I kind of like that handcuffing type of bet here. You could also check as well. Spam stuff says, I think I check because you can't get 3 streets from an 8. But with that being said, though, if you were to get 2 streets from an 8, this might be the street to get it. Now, it could go check, check, and then I guess it's a low break. I'm just saying that there's going to be a lot of overcards to an 8 here, too, anyways, on the river, if you sort of let it check through. What did you decide to do here on the turn?
I went 300.
Okay, so you went a little bit more. So you went half. So hero bets 300. Okay.
Button thinks for a little bit and then calls.
So the pot's 12-15 now. Yeah, that's kind of a little bit bizarre in the sense that, like, once you bet the turn here for this sizing, there's no draws out there, and then he calls. In a normal type of situation here where we're not dealing kind of with a special player, no matter what the river is, I would say the river's a check fold. And what I mean by that, people say, what do you mean check fold? What I mean by that is that you can check the river, and then if it goes check, check, you're going to win versus like 8x pocket 9s that somehow didn't 3-bet off. But if you check and the guy bets, I can't imagine how you could ever have the best hand here. Now, obviously you're saying with this guy, it could be a little bit different, but just because you bet the turn and then get called, and then you say, whoa, the river's going to be a check fold, like, didn't we make a mistake by betting turn? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. So the pot is 12-15, right, as we get to the river here?
Yeah.
8 deuce deuce, and then the ace of clubs. By the way, 8x of clubs is a hand that's available here too.
Yeah, do you think he could ever show up with like 2 high clubs now? Like king queen clubs, king jack clubs, or he turns the nut flush draw?
Boy, that's a pretty optimistic, like, that's a real, I mean, well, I guess he's got the straddle behind him. He only had one guy behind him. That's a really, yeah, I mean, I get suited Broadway types of hands. What is this guy's play? Is he all over the place? Like pre-flop is hard. Like he doesn't 3-bet those hands always.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, like I said, it's all, I mean, I've seen him 3-bet 10 deuce, and then like I said, he flatted a raise with ace ace.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's possible. If you're trying to find a hand that needs to bluff at the end.
You would assume at this point a deuce would raise, right?
Again, usually the only deuce that someone's going to play in their hand that's V-pipped would be ace deuce, but this guy sounds like he's even wider than that. Maybe not necessarily. Maybe not necessarily. I mean, you would think it would raise at some point, but maybe he's planning on raising the river or bombing it when you check to him. This is why sometimes these guys are hard to play when they're all over the place. What's the river?
River's going to be 9 of spades.
All right, so that doesn't really change anything, really, right?
Yeah, I mean, if he showed up with 9-9, good for him. But I thought of it mainly as a brick.
But you do think that this has to be a check here at the end, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, my only thought was, I mean, if I check, I don't think he's ever checking back. I mean,
yeah, but that's fine though. That just
right, yeah,
you don't want to.
It was the only thought.
Yeah, you don't want to say, well, I bet because I don't want to call a certain amount. Really, it's what is the best decision, and this is a very common kind of. I'm not saying that you necessarily you're making this mistake, but this is a very, very common thought from a lot of players. They're like, well, I don't want to check because what if he bets this? Like, what if he bets huge? What am I going to do? And usually the answer to that is you look at the pot odds and you do the hand rating and you make the best decision at the end based upon the pot odds, right? It's not, now someone might say, well, what about block betting here to like prevent him from the thing with block betting is, and I said this many, many times on this show, the only times that block betting can ever be correct, he has to be able to call with worse. If he never can call with worse versus a block bet, then it has to be a check. Now, you maybe could make a case that you get called by like an 8 versus a block and it accomplishes sometimes. But again, like if he has an 8 though, like he's just going to check that back anyways, I would think. But yeah, I just can't get on board with saying like, I don't want to check here because I'm going to face a huge bet. That's basically what I'm saying, Nick.
No, I agree. Yeah. If I bet, I'm bluffing. I'm just turning jacks into a bluff.
Or you're blocking. You're trying to get called by something worse, and that might not be really viable in this spot, right? On this run out.
But so I do check.
Okay.
I check, and then he takes his 500 chip off his stack of 100s and slides the whole stack of 100s for a bet of 700.
Well, again, I can't tell you. I mean, this seems like it's a little bit more of a thing that might be a little bit player dependent. And like I said, if a guy is kind of all over the place, these things can be sometimes they can be kind of hard in a certain situation, especially if they sometimes slow play and then they sometimes fast play and then they're kind of all over the place. Against a more standard player that's not a lag with his background, it's definitely a check fold for sure. Now here, it's 1900. 700 for you to call. The only thing I actually wonder about here too is like, what if you had played ace king? Let's say you had like ace king of diamonds and you had started a C bet. I'm not saying that you would always do that, or ace queen or ace jack of diamonds, something like that, right? Let's say you started a C bet with ace X with the backdoor, you hit the ace, and then you took the same line. What would you do on the river on 8 deuce deuce ace 9?
I'd probably just continue.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, because at that point, if he's called two streets, I guess it's the same situation. Like
against a lag. And that's the other thing too about a lag. If he was a good lag and he was like overfloating some bullshit, like say like ace 4 with a backdoor, he 100% should be value betting the river here if you check to him. So sometimes against a lag like that, if you had like an ace jack, you still get the value if you ran into ace X because he should always be betting because if he's a decent lag, and then you get the bluffing type of the snap off type of bluff here. It sounds to me like you might be troubled because you just know this guy might float here with like a lot of ace X here, and you could getting towned. Is that right? Value towned here.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking back on flop. I was like, when he calls flop, I didn't know how much he was floating with. That's ace. Like, there's a lot of ace X I felt like he could float with. I mean, I couldn't really say he's going to float with like 6s and 7s. And then when the ace comes and he calls again, it felt very ace heavy or air.
Yeah. Well, some sort of structured air, right? What did you end up doing? What was the decision you made? Sometimes I flick in the call with these guys. If you don't know and you said you're getting like what, almost 3-1, and you're like, I've seen this guy turn over so much shit that he shouldn't even be in there with. How could it possibly be bad to call? But it's got to be a special type of player, right? Yeah.
So I say I can only beat a bluff, and I muck.
All right.
Yeah. And immediately everyone at the table is like, well, it's him. He's bluffing.
Oh, God. Yeah.
So he goes, I'll show you one card, and shows the jack of hearts and mucks.
The jack of hearts. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't have ace jack. Well, or unless you thought it was always going to be pre-flop, if he's going to 3-bet that off pre.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I feel like it's very ace jack. I mean, if he had jack deuce of hearts, good for him.
Nah, jack deuce of hearts might be another one.
And then if he was jack jack or jack, jack X or something.
The other jack that would be crazy.
Yeah, if that happened, he bluffed me off it. I guess good for him.
Yeah, a lot of times when guys show one card like that and they show the one that doesn't matter, I think I'm okay with the fold. But like I said, whenever I'm up against these guys that are all over the place and show all these crazy hands down, and at least that they play some hands that I'm not, that I think they shouldn't necessarily play in a way that they did, trying to lag it up, then sometimes when I'm getting pot odds, I just call. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's almost like a close your eyes and call type of thing.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it.